Protests in China. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. In a dozen cities across China, at least a dozen cities, demonstrations continue to erupt with tens of thousands of people seeming to take to the streets to protest what seems to be their opposition to COVID lockdown policies. But in any case, by some accounts, these demonstrations are the largest since the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Those protests were ended with a bloody and brutal crackdown by the Chinese military. Here to talk about what's going on now in China is Jake Werner. He's a research fellow at the Quincy Institute. He's also an expert on all things China. Jake, first of all, thanks for joining us. How do you explain these demonstrations and what's driving them?
There's just a range of grievances here. You know, anytime you get a big protest wave like this, it's going to be drawing on grievances that are broad. The thing that has made grievances particularly broad in China over the last couple of years is the extremely strict COVID restrictions, where China has tried very hard to eliminate any and all infections. And that requires people to quarantine in their apartments or in quarantine centers for 2 weeks if they are infected or if they are exposed to someone who's been infected. And the very intense Chinese surveillance system makes sure that a lot of people get caught up in that. Those who are a little bit reluctant to quarantine in this way, they are forcibly confined to their home, sometimes even have their front doors bolted shut. And that kind of feeds into what set off this protest. People have been watching the effects that this has had on other Chinese people around the country. Recently, there was a fire in the western provincial city of Urumqi. The fire killed 10 people, and it seems clear that some obstacles that were in the way of firefighters getting to the emergency is what contributed to a very low response and probably increased the number of deaths. People found out about that and they said, this could have been me. You know, like the fire door in my apartment is locked too. And then that sort of just resonates with the entire frustration about these increasingly broad lockdowns, increasingly broad because the infection rate has been going up, and it's been affecting more and more people. So people's livelihoods are affected. Millions of people are locked in their apartments. It just set off a general frustration around the COVID restrictions. But there's also a political element. We can talk a bit more about that if you like.
Well, those images of the fire and people essentially being locked into their apartments and realizing that some people, you know, maybe it may cost them their lives because they're essentially jammed into the apartment and can't leave has been so sort of horrific and certainly seems to have inspired a lot of people. And a lot of people in the West and the United States in particular have been watching this. What do you make of the Biden administration response? What should the response be in terms of the US relationship with China?
Well, thus far, the Biden administration has been fairly cautious. They've said they're skeptical that the zero COVID policy is workable. They've said that people have the right to protest. They support people's right to protest, but they haven't really gone beyond that. They haven't strongly embraced the protesters or said that China should democratize immediately, something like that. I think that is actually quite wise under the circumstances. The issue is that the administration and the US in general is in kind of a fix right now. The relationship with China has deteriorated really sharply over the last 5 years. And both the Trump and the Biden administrations have taken increasingly antagonistic policies towards China, both in security realms and in the economy. And increasingly, that has damaged the reputation of the United States in China, in the population as a whole. And so if the United States were seen to be embracing these protesters, the danger is that it would discredit them amongst many people in China who think that the motivations the United States has in its China policy are very suspect.
And it would certainly also perhaps undermine whatever is left of the relationship with the Chinese government, which might see the United States as trying to somehow meddle in their internal affairs. But on the other hand, the United States, I suppose, has some sort of moral obligation. So is it pretty much like walking a tightrope here? They can't go too far in criticizing what's happening in China, but it's also the case, I suppose, that the United States can't be silent.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tack that the Biden administration has taken it manages to walk that line, right? They say we support the right of people in China and everywhere to protest. And in fact, the Chinese Constitution itself enshrines the right to protest. So this should not be controversial. This should not be something that's interfering in the internal affairs of China to simply say, people everywhere have the right to protest. But going further than that and giving the sense that the United States supports some kind of regime change or could be covertly supporting the protesters or something like that, that would be quite dangerous, both for American interests and I think for the interests of people in China.
What do all of these protests in China mean for the regime of Xi Jinping?
Good question. It's maybe too soon to say because we don't know how big the protests will get, if they'll kind of peter out. They've been fairly quiet the last few days, or if they swell back up and the Chinese government fails to address some of the discontent that's out there. That's also a possibility. So we'll have to see the course of the protests take. But one thing that I think is certain is that this is the most sort of direct challenge to the leadership of Xi Jinping that he has seen inside his own country. For the last 10 years, Xi Jinping has been closing off the political. There used to be some political space in China for protesting, for dissent, for criticizing the government. That increasingly has been closed off. And the recent 20th Party Congress affirmed a third term for Xi Jinping. So, people in China and outside of China looked at that and said, okay, that's what we can expect more of this. And I think that is also something that's behind the protests, is the sense that, we have lost the ability to be critical of the government and we want that back. And so that's another one of these underlying grievances that the government needs to respond to. The question is, will they respond with more repression, or will they open up to a certain extent?
Well, and that gets to something I mentioned at the top of the show, the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square in Beijing when Chinese tanks rolled in and crushed, literally killed thousands of people. What are the options for the Chinese government now? I mean, is there a danger that if there is a very strong military effort to eliminate this, that the backlash increases? I mean, is there a balancing act as well for the Chinese government here?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've seen this sort of general type of protest, spontaneous, not organized, not part of organized politics, but a spontaneous popular protest of what's going on in a country, criticizing unaccountable elites. This is something we've seen around the world over the last several years, all the way back to the Arab Spring. So in some ways, this is something very similar. And almost without fail, if the government comes in with a heavy hand, that causes the protest to swell. People get more outraged and more people come into the streets in support of those who were attacked. Thus far, the Chinese government has not done something like that. The kind of recent history of the way the Chinese government has dealt with protests is generally to hit hard against people they take to be leading the protests, but to offer concessions and not bring any major consequences for the vast majority of people who engage in the protests. So, like as I said, some of that space has closed under Xi Jinping. We've seen greater repression of activism under Xi Jinping. So we can't tell for sure what direction it's going to go, but that would be a model that the party could pursue that would not involve major violence against the protesters. But a lot really depends on the protesters as well, what their demands are, how big they get, and how long this goes on for.
As far as the direction of COVID in China, a lot of people here in the United States may not quite understand. I mean, China really, it sealed cities off. And as a result, I suppose it tamped down the spread of COVID. But is that possible to sort of keep it contained now? And what happens if it spreads across China?
Yes, China has been extremely successful. It has saved many lives. The total number of deaths in China is in the thousands, not in the hundreds of thousands. And that is remarkable for a country the size of China, comparing it to a place like India, comparing it to a place like the United States. Much lower infection rates, much lower death rates. The problem now is that the Omicron variant is starting to get out of control. It's far more transmissible. It seems quite clear now that the zero COVID strategy will have to become increasingly restrictive. Will start to choke off the economy and increase the popular unrest around the policies. That does not seem tenable. The government does sort of look like it's trying to ease into a less restrictive approach to COVID. But if the infection rate shoots up and we get tens of millions of people being hospitalized, and the estimates that are out there show that if the government were to raise restrictions immediately, there would be a wave of infection. Millions upon millions of people would be hospitalized and sent to ICUs, and we could expect probably something like 600,000 deaths coming out of that wave of infections. So that also would be a huge challenge to the power and legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is a very difficult line that the government's walking right now.
And China's infrastructure in terms of dealing with something of that magnitude, in terms of their healthcare system, hospitals, is it ready for it?
No, it's not ready. This would completely overwhelm the Chinese healthcare system, which remains quite weak despite the claims to being a socialist country. The number of ICU beds in China is only about 4 per 100,000, which is about 1/4 the level in the United States and smaller than many other countries in Europe. So the Chinese system just does not have the capacity to deal with a massive wave of infections. We would see it overwhelmed in the same way that we saw systems like New York's system overwhelmed when COVID first hit the United States.
Jake Warner is a research fellow at the Quincy Institute. His work has examined U.S.-Chinese policies, relationship. Jake, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yes, thanks. Wonderful to be on.
You got it. Welcome back to the conversation. If you are a consumer of even, say, a modest variety of news sources, you probably know by now that during Thanksgiving week, Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago dined with Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist who is a Holocaust denier, and his friend Kanye West, the rapper who has trafficked in hate. A number of Republicans have described this as an effing PR nightmare, not just for MAGA world, but also for the Republican Party. But if you rely solely on Fox News, this is probably news to you. In fact, according to Media Matters, Fox News, since this happened, has spent a total amount of time covering the story of 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Joining us is Craig Harrington. He's the research director for Media Matters. And Craig, I know you guys watch Fox News, so the rest of us don't have to, but was this perhaps even surprising for all of you who track them?
It wasn't necessarily surprising, and first of all, thank you for having me, David. It wasn't necessarily surprising for those of us who watch Fox News full time. You know, we somewhat expected that they would find every opportunity to bury this story and attempt to move on. But you can't deny how stark the lack of coverage was. And 7 minutes is actually being generous. We round up for the sake of simplicity, but if you go back and watch, it's only about 6 minutes and 40 seconds, which, as you know, is one long cable news segment. And actually, when we did some comparisons between Fox and their competitors, legitimate news organizations like CNN and MSNBC, we found very easily on Monday morning individual segments on CNN's morning show and on MSNBC's morning show that were roughly equal to, or actually, in the case of CNN's, double the length of coverage that Fox gave this story. On Fox, this was just a couple of headline news segments, a couple of mentions so that they could claim that they didn't ignore it entirely. But when you look at the breadth of a 24-hour news organization like Fox, they could have dug into this as much as they wanted to. Anyone who has seen Fox go wall to wall with coverage on their pseudo scandals or their manufactured crises knows what Fox can do when they want to highlight something. This was a very, very deliberate effort. And an obvious effort.
The most that it got highlighted were people who were not even on air, talent of Fox News, but were invited on, whether it's Fox News Sunday or some other show, and happened to mention it. What's so surprising to me about all this is that Fox News, the Murdoch empire, have come out, it seems like, sort of against Donald Trump, saying it's time for the party to move on. So what does Fox News gain from a strategic perspective of trying to bury this story and trying to keep Donald Trump's hands clean when it comes to anti-Semitism and white nationalism and far-right stuff?
Well, in this case, excuse me, in this case, Fox is implicated just as badly as Donald Trump is. It's almost impossible for Fox News, which hosts Tucker Carlson in its most prominent primetime news segment, Tucker Carlson's hour-long primetime program, it's almost impossible for Fox News to be taken seriously when they say anything regarding anti-Semitism when they promote what is essentially the white power hour hosted by Tucker Carlson. All of the tropes that Nick Fuentes and Ye have promoted on social media, the sorts of commentary that have gotten them banned or deplatformed, is largely just passed off as commentary from Tucker Carlson on a pretty routine basis, with the sharpest corners sanded down. Nick Fuentes is willing to use racial slurs that would never make it onto air on Fox, and he's willing to say overtly what would only ever be dog whistles or just asking questions from Fox News's primetime lineup. But they're just as implicated in this as Trump is, and that's also the same reason that you see the GOP, saying vaguely that they oppose anti-Semitism and putting out condemnations of Ye or of Fuentes individually, but never mentioning Trump. If they ever brought up the fact that it was problematic that Trump had this relationship with anti-Semites, it would immediately reflect on their problematic relationship with the same people and with Trump himself.
Full disclosure, I was a correspondent for I left, and that was more than 20 years ago. But back then, and when I was in Washington, and I'm so curious, Craig, to hear your sort of perspective on this. When I was in DC, Fox tried to sort of make a distinction between its news programming led by Brit Hume or say Bret Baier and its opinion programming, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly. And it seems like they're still trying to do the same, saying, oh no, well, Bret Baier is a newsman, he doesn't traffic in this. And yet, there was that book that came out that found that Bret Baier had actually pushed his political decision desk in 2020 to take back their call of Arizona for Joe Biden. So in terms of sort of the zeitgeist of Washington, is Fox still somehow able to get away with making this argument about a distinction between Bret Baier and Tucker Carlson, or is that just sort of laughed at now?
There's some occasion where serious journalists and commentators who treat themselves with some degree of respect will actually sort of play along with the news moniker in Fox News's name. But one of the things that we have seen over the past decade is a fairly successful effort from Media Matters and from other organizations and from legitimate news outlets who don't want to see themselves included into the cohort with Fox News, recognizing that it is not a legitimate news operation. You may occasionally hear people comment that there are journalists who work at Fox and there are people who do legitimate or objective analysis, but it really just has to do with longevity. The longer you stay at Fox, the more partisan your commentary naturally becomes, and that is even true of people who headline the supposed straight news programs, say Bret Baier or John Roberts or Brit Hume, who you mentioned. Brit Hume is now widely considered to be one of their most partisan senior political analysts, and he started off as someone who was regularly trotted out as being objective and analytical, and now he's purely partisan in his commentary and very predictable in his perspective on news and notes. Brit Hume, like you said, had pressured the decision desk at Fox News to rescind their Arizona call in 2020. He also has allowed his commentary to be imbued with right-wing talking points in many instances.
I think you meant Bret Baier. I think you said Brit Hume, but in any case, yeah. But all, look, one of the things that sort of struck me in the wake of Donald Trump and trafficking and anti-Semitism and white nationalism is I think the FBI director testified recently in Washington and said that the number of sort of hateful acts, violence, and threats against Jewish institutions is up something like 60%. Or comprises something like 60% of all the threats, even though the Jewish community comprises, I think, only 2.6%. So it feels like there is a relationship, there is almost a causal relationship between, okay, Fox News sort of washes its hands of it or doesn't condemn this stuff, and it almost feels like with a wink and a nod, it says to the crazy people, to the racists in our midst, oh yeah, it's okay for them to engage in violence. And in a way, it makes me think that in some ways Fox News is responsible.
It does seem as if you can point to a media permission structure, particularly when you think about the way that Fox News is used as a validator for so many far-right talking points, where they uphold or amplify individual far-right motivations or individuals or provocateurs or instigators, they may not officially condone all of that individual behavior, or they may not condone everything that an individual or organization adheres to and promotes. But by amplifying these things, they create a permission structure, and they inject these conversations into the bloodstream. The anti-Semitism that we see routinely from Fox News, and the anti-Semitism that we see routinely from the individuals that Fox News chooses to amplify and promote, it's getting out there and it's becoming more mainstream, particularly within the Republican base. And so it shouldn't be seen as a surprise that we might see hate crimes or uses of slurs on the rise. Whenever you create a permission structure, you're going to see provocateurs rush to fill that void. This is something we saw with Twitter as well. When Elon Musk completed his corporate takeover of that social media platform, we saw a very brief but enormous spike in the use of slurs and other forms of identifiable hate speech on that platform. Why? It wasn't as if a new rush of users had joined. It was users who were already on the platform now sort of testing the fences. And even if they did it only briefly, even if it was eventually rescinded, creating the opportunity gave the impetus and the motivation for individuals to act out.
I know that Media Matters through the years has tried to reach out to Fox News to get to some response, and usually there's no response. But in this particular case, where it's been pointed out by Media Matters, and I suppose maybe even other journalists have picked up and said, "Hey, Fox News, what's going on here? You've only given maybe 7 minutes to this story." Has there been any response, any reaction from Fox News to when this is brought up and people talk about it?
They haven't responded to this individual story or the aspects of it, as is pretty typical for that organization. They don't think of criticism of their reporting as valid, and generally they try to avoid really any recognition of it unless it comes with an attached legal threat. But what we have seen is some of the commentary that Fox News is providing in the days since our study of their coverage or lack of coverage of the Fuentes incident. Their commentary on it has begun to shift a little bit. Initially, it was to bury it, hide it in a news alert, give it 21 seconds of airtime and move on. And now their commentary has shifted a bit, where they're having some of their on-air talent address the scandal directly and acknowledge that it is important, but then demand that we can pivot toward other things that they say as more important. Just yesterday, during their midday program, Outnumbered, Lisa Kennedy Montgomery, who's one of their professional propagandists, she was on there and she was saying, in response to the Fuentes story, obviously this is something that is all over the news, but it's really a mainstream media story. It's not relevant to the people. And what really matters, and what I wish the media would cover, is the situation at the southern border. And she was actually trying to pivot away from a conversation about a scandal involving white supremacists and Trump, and pivot toward talking points that are openly white supremacist, which actually emanate from Trump. And she was doing it without any degree of irony, because that's what they want to talk about now.
Yeah, it's just as shameful, and they have no shame, basically. The idea that they would say this stuff straight is remarkable. One quick question, finally. Fox News likes to say, "Oh, well, we're not OAN, we're not Newsmax." You guys are watching all of this. Are they moving towards those really far-right channels, or are they sort of staying in their lane?
I mean, Fox has more or less absorbed much of the far-right ecosystem that previously was available for Newsmax and OAN. You'll remember, and this is something that you mentioned earlier, when Fox News did make the call for Arizona, a lot of their viewers moved en masse to OAN and Newsmax, and Fox responded in kind by unleashing their primetime lineup to go even further right and bring those people back into the fold. And they've largely been successful, and that was over 2 years ago.
Yeah, and there was Brett Baer right after the election saying, well, maybe we should take it back, and he's their Fox News guy. Remarkable stuff. Craig Harrington, Research Director of Media Matters. Craig, always great having you on the program. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for your time.
And that'll do it for this edition of The Conversation. On behalf of Asher Cofield, Gina Kim, Craig Lowry, and Bart Kyle, I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. No,
We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby.
You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast?
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it. We will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good bosser.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you there. All right, here's the thing. Senate runoff, state of Georgia, kind of a big deal. Make sure you tune in right here because we will bring you live election coverage. Senator Raphael Warnock in a runoff now with Republican nominee Herschel Walker. Balance of power, yes, but also we will provide live coverage of the Georgia Senate runoff beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time, right here at tyt.com/live.
Get some!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian. Dun 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 dun. Let's be honest.
What was that jingle?
That's a Christmas jingle. Dun 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 dun. It's that time of year. You know it. You know I'm not starting too early. You know it. Okay. Now we do have good news, bad news, lots of news.
Crazy news. I want to go to sleep. I'm tired. Very tired today.
We have a new villain, the black condom. We'll explain later in the program. All right, let's go.
Well, we begin with what I would argue is the most important story of the day, although everyone is obsessed with Kanye. We will get to that in the second hour. So yeah, I'm gonna make you guys hold on for that. But for now, let's talk about the rail strike. The Senate has officially voted on adopting a measure that forces a deal between the national freight railroad companies and their unions. There was a separate bill too, the bill that would give the workers what they wanted. They don't want just measly 4 days of sick leave. But the legislation, the separate legislation, was a little more generous, 7 days of sick leave. One of them passed, one of them didn't. Can you guess which? Now, the proposal to give workers 7 days of sick leave failed. Wow, what a shocker, to pick up enough Republican support to overcome a 60-vote threshold set for adopting the measure, and fell 52 to 43. Now, my prediction yesterday in regard to people like Josh Hawley, a Republican, turned out to be wrong. But Josh Hawley very likely knew that this legislation wasn't gonna pass. So let me give you the details. 6 Republicans voted for the sick leave measures. Senators Mike Braun, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley, John Kennedy, and Marco Rubio. Get a load of this though, Senator Joe Manchin is the worst person in Congress. He's the only Democrat to vote against it.
So they always tell us, but it's better that Manchin's a Democrat than a Republican.
Apparently not.
He's apparently more right-wing than the Republicans, so there you go. Congratulations, Democratic leadership, for keeping him in the fold. That worked out brilliantly.
Okay, so let's pause, because I want to discuss. I actually want to discuss the House first, because that's where I believe the problem began. And part of the problem, and what enrages me beyond words at this point, is that the Congressional Progressive Caucus went along with this maneuver when I also believe that corporate Democrats knew full well that the bill to give the workers the sick leave that they desperately need and want was gonna fail in the Senate, okay? They could have voted on one piece of legislation, right? Think about that. One piece of legislation that both prevents the workers from striking, I guess, right? Because that's what the goal here is. They don't want the economy to shut down. They don't want to lose $2 billion a day as a result of a strike. But the bill should have included the sick leave. And so why did they separate it, Cenk? Why do you think it was separated into 2 separate pieces of legislation? Why do you think that happened?
Yeah, so here's why it happened. Theoretically, conservative Democrats put pressure on leadership, but that's nonsense. They don't have to put pressure on leadership because Democratic leadership is already very, very conservative on economic issues. So Hakeem Jeffries didn't need any convincing. The number 1 priority is make sure there's no strike and that the workers know their goddamn role. Number 2 priority is set up a fake vote where we know we're gonna lose, but we get to do marketing saying, oh, we're with the workers, okay? So that's the House version of it. And then on the Senate side, we'll have the Republicans block it through a filibuster, but we'll have some prominent Republicans who are pretending to go populist actually vote in favor of the workers.
Exactly.
So that those handful of Republicans can get all the credit for being populist, for fighting for the workers, while the Democrats take the blame But either way, the donors that gave them the money to both the Republicans and the Democrats are incredibly happy. They get a little pat on the head. Hey, nice job, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Joe Biden, okay? And hey, look, who's the populist here is Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. Look at that. I mean, you literally couldn't bungle it any worse than this.
Josh Hawley voted against providing paid sick leave to federal employees. He was a no vote on that piece of legislation. He is not an economic populist. He does not care about ensuring that workers get paid sick leave. And by the way, I mean, if there were a prevalence of economic populists in the Republican Party, we would have no difficulty passing, mandatory family leave, something that we still don't have in this country. We do have in a huge portion of the country forced pregnancy and forced birth with absolutely no social safety net to catch women and families as they struggle financially and are forced to bring a child into the world. But all of this, you're right, Cenk. The strategy by the, Republicans in the Senate who voted in favor of providing the paid time off, genius.
Yeah, of course, they know it's not gonna pass. By the way, guys, just so you know, the Republicans talk to their colleagues. They know for a fact it's not going to pass.
Exactly.
It's not like they all go to the vote with like, golly gee, I don't know what's gonna happen, right? So, and they have a certain amount of Republicans that say that, raise their hand and go, I would like to pretend to be a populist. And they go, oh, okay, sure, you can pretend because we're gonna win this vote, right? And then by the way, the Democrats do the same thing. They tell Hakeem Jeffries, yeah, you guys can all pretend to be populist. And on the Senate, we're all pretending, other than Manchin, to be in favor of the American worker. We all know we're gonna lose. So don't worry about it. And mainstream media, there are dogs, right? So they will unquestioningly report the Democrats, oh man, they tried so hard. But golly gee, for the billionth time in a row, there was nothing they could do.
I mean, we should, eventually, maybe you guys do it tomorrow. There should be a comparative analysis on independent media headlines on this vote versus how the corporate media headlines are written. Because from what I've already seen today, it's avert a strike, avert a strike, avert a strike, right? It's a good thing, it's positive. The legislation will prevent the strike from happening, avert the strike. It's not about how unbelievably cruel it is to force workers to essentially, to show up to work sick, right?
0 paid sick days?
0 paid sick days. I mean, it is
absurd.
And we're talking about a monopolized industry that intentionally cut its workforce to the tune of 20% since 2018. Why do you think they did that? They did that to maximize their profits, spend as little as possible on labor, maximize profits so they can do the corporate stock buybacks, so they can do the dividends for their shareholders. That's all that matters to them. That's how the system works. And if anyone believes that members of Congress, especially Republican senators who are buying individual stocks themselves, who certainly do not want to see their stock portfolios suffer from a strike, but also they don't want their stock portfolios to suffer from corporations not maximizing their profits, right? So they always enable the corporate greed over and over and over again. This is how it's done. Most people can't see through this garbage. I gotta be honest, I'm real sick. This has happened multiple times at this point. I'm real sick of AOC in particular. Like one day on Twitter, she'll say, I'm looking out for labor. It's unreasonable. We can't vote to prevent them from striking. They deserve the sick days off. Next day, she agrees to vote yes on the legislation that basically intervenes preventing them from striking. But then the next day,
they had a compromise.
Exactly. There's always an excuse. It's always like high-minded, three-dimensional chess, except you got played. Do you not see that?
So wait, but look, this is just factual. So
Jesus.
And so, look, she is an ostensible ally of ours. We're just being honest with you guys. If you really thought it was a compromise and the workers had a chance of winning, well, then you got played. That's a fact, right? Because they did not win. For the billionth time in a row, Democratic leadership lied to you. The only other option is you knew that it was a fake compromise and you voted for it anyway because you didn't want trouble in Washington. Trouble's a real pain in the ass, right? then everybody yells at you and everybody calls you the bad guy and they get their goons in corporate media to harangue you. Don't get me wrong, this isn't down, like, I get it. There's real pain associated with having courage in Washington.
The courage in life.
Right, and so, but every progressive huffs and puffs, et cetera, in Washington, and then goes along with the latest compromise with Democratic leadership, which always leads, 100% of the time, leads to the same result, which is, oh golly gee, we lost. So no one could have guessed that the trust Biden strategy wouldn't work.
How many times does it need to happen? How many times? How many times do they need to hear that, oh no, but we need to separate the bills. We need
and we're gonna pass your part later.
Yeah, no, how many times?
Right away.
How many times? How many times does it need to happen? I mean, it's laughable. Okay, so let's move on to what could happen next, because it doesn't necessarily need to be the end, right? If Biden claims to be, this pro-union president who's really looking out for the workers, there is something he can do, even in this late hour, even after this legislation and everything. So Ryan Grimm notes that union source tells me that their next push will be to demand that Biden include railway workers in the executive order that mandates 56 hours of paid sick leave. And David Dayen also brought to everyone's attention something that I had forgotten that's relevant to this, just to give you some historical context. Obama signed an executive order in 2015 requiring all federal contractors to guarantee 7 paid sick days to their workers. Great, so there is precedent for that. If Biden wanted to, he could go ahead and issue an executive order where the rail companies have to provide the sick leave. Will he do it? I doubt it, but we'll see.
No way.
We'll see.
No way.
Okay, but hold on. There's a second part to what David Dayen tweeted that I think is super relevant. Now, Obama did that for workers, but there was a catch. He specifically exempted the rail industry from it, even though they are federal contractors.
Yeah, look, guys, let's get past the gaslighting of mainstream media. They're always gonna tell you that Obama, Pelosi, Biden, et cetera, are American heroes. When they deliver a big fat donut, nothing to you, they always say, oh, there's nothing they could do. I mean, they want in their hearts are golden. It's just their actions suck out totally by mistake and accident, and there was, et cetera. Right, so I'm gonna end you with 3 numbers here. The chance of the strikers, not the strikers, the workers in this case, prevailing and getting the 7 days of sick leave is 0%, 0. If there was 10 Republicans to go along with the Democrats, they would have lost Manchin. If there was 11, they would have lost Sinema, okay? Or they would have lost one of the Republicans. A Republican or a Democrat would have bailed to make sure they never got to 60 in the Senate. And everyone in Washington, including every reporter, knows that. They just all choose to lie to you and play this kabuki theater for you guys. We're the only ones that tell you what the reality is. I mean, the right wing's often loony town, right? And they're like, oh yeah, Republicans love workers. That's why we say they should have no goddamn minimum wages, no sick days, no nothing, no paid family leave. They're like, but we love workers, do you? And then the corporate media does these lies. So the last 2 numbers are $20 billion in profits from recently for the railroad companies. It's a record. So it's not like they don't have the money. They're just spitting in the workers' face, and every goddamn corrupt politician in Washington is helping them spit in the workers' face. Total liars, okay? And the last number is 2 billion. 2 billion a day is what the strike would cost the entire economy. That's why they say, oh, we can't have a strike. Well, one of our viewers, one of our members, I love our members, tyt.com/join, had a comment that I read. I gave $100 to because it was so great. And now the workers are starting to use it all over social media. I mean, I'm sure they came to it from a different place, but it's so, or maybe they didn't, but it's such the right idea. So our member wrote in, they said, oh, apparently the workers are worth $2 billion a day. Yet all of Washington just said they're worth nothing and should get 0 sick days that are paid. So, okay, we have our answer. The workers are invaluable and Washington doesn't give a goddamn about them and will screw them at every turn, including the Democrats. Fact.
All right, let's move on to a little bit of positive news, potentially, and then we'll take a break.
The Justice Department taking action on the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland saying, in part, we will continue to prioritize cases in the communities most burdened by environmental harm.
That's right. Turns out that Merrick Garland is not only, awake and alive, he's actually doing some stuff that could be positive. So I guess hats off to Merrick Garland in this regard. Now, we've been talking regularly about what is taking place in Jackson, Mississippi. Their water infrastructure is crumbling. Many people living in Jackson, Mississippi are seeing disgusting brown water coming out of their faucets. And so the department, meaning the DOJ, filed a proposal for intervention this week, on Tuesday specifically, and US District Judge Henry Wingate approved it later that day in Mississippi. The move authorized the appointment of a third-party manager to oversee reforms to Jackson's water system, which nearly collapsed late summer and continues to struggle. Now, Garland did a press conference on this. I'm glad he's paying attention to it. He sees this as part of the Biden administration's efforts to do something about environmental injustice in this country. To be quite honest with you, the fact that we have many parts of this country with unsafe drinking water, it goes beyond environmental injustice. We are living in a country that is crumbling due to corporate greed, due to the privatization efforts of our infrastructure, of our utilities, of our natural resources. This is what the consequence is. And Garland said that the purpose of the complaint is to allow the Justice Department to negotiate a consent decree which would empower a federal court to force changes to Jackson's water system. Now, what exactly is going on with the water system? Let's get a little specific here. So for 4 days last August, people waited in lines for water to drink, bathe, cook, and flush toilets in Mississippi's capital, as some businesses were temporarily forced to close for lack of potable water. The partial failure of the water system that month followed flooding on the nearby Pearl River, which exacerbated longstanding problems in one of Jackson's 2 water treatment plants. In fact, some of the best reporting on this is by Judd Legum over at Popular Info. He was interviewed by Democracy Now! About it, and he gets into the details of the privatization effort in Jackson, Mississippi that has exacerbated this problem. Let's watch.
Starting in 2010, Siemens came to the city of Jackson, who was already suffering under a very faulty water system at that time, and said, we have a solution. You can pay us $90 million. That's the largest contract signed at that time in city history. We will install these new automated water meters. This will not only pay for itself, but generate extra revenue, which you can invest back into the water system. They came to the city offering a solution, but this contract ended up being a disaster. Not only did it not meet their promises, the automated meters didn't work really at all. Many people stopped getting bills. Those who got bills received ones that were far too high and did not pay them. And so it created massive deficits.
So yeah, I mean, get a German-based multinational corporation involved in your water infrastructure and everything will work out just fine. All you need to do is pay them $90 million for them to screw the system up even further. And that's exactly what happened here. There were other issues as well, including a cold snap in 2021 that left tens of thousands of people in Jackson without running water after pipes froze. The next video has more detail on that.
Lines we're going to show you can be seen forming around the block at the water distribution centers throughout the area. Just to let you know how this all happened, severe flooding damaged the city's water treatment facility over the weekend, causing the plant to fail. But this is not the first time Mississippi's capital has experienced a water crisis. Many residents say this is a problem that has been grossly ignored.
I really wanted you guys to see what people are going through just to get access to safe and clean water in Jackson, Mississippi. It is absolutely disgusting. And finally, if you're wondering if there's any leadership looking out for the people of Jackson, Mississippi in the state of Mississippi, you'd be mistaken if you think there is, because the governor, Tate Reeves, is an awful human being and has gone to great lengths to mock and insult the people of Jackson, Mississippi. Here's an example.
Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves came under criticism for disparaging his own capital city, Jackson. This is Reeves speaking during the groundbreaking ceremony for Jones Capital LLC headquarters.
I've got to tell you, it is a great day to be in Hattiesburg. It's also, as always, a great day to not be in Jackson.
Always a great day to not be in Jackson. Jackson is overwhelmingly African American, over 80% of the city.
I mean, what kind of leadership is that? And by the way, that's a guy who wants to ban abortion, even in cases where a young teenage girl has been raped, because he's pro-life, right? Except when it comes to the majority black population that's suffering right now with unsafe drinking water in Jackson, Mississippi. He's disgusting. Pig, absolute pig.
All right, there's been one set of folks that have been on Jackson, Mississippi side the entire time. You guys. So we knew about this problem a long time ago. Rashad Ritchie on our program, Indisputable, in the TYT network was one of the first to cover it. He's covered it the most, probably of any show in all of media. And because of him, we started a program called tyt.com/relief to get water to the people of Jackson, Mississippi, because we knew how bad it was, and you guys delivered. So our goal was $28,000. We're actually just $286 short of it today. And my guess is if you guys can chip in or $5 or $10 right now, you'll put us over the top. And so what have we already done? We've served over 360 families with 2 boxes of clean water per family. We've also helped 135 people get their water tested. And we're sending in the last set of water testing kits to make sure that everybody's got them and can make sure that their water is safe. So even before Merrick Garland, the Justice Department, the federal government came in to help Jackson, you guys, the TYT family, TYT Nation, was already there. Let's finish the job. I love you guys for being generous, for caring about someone you don't know. And look at the sorry state of our country.
Yep.
So we have to rescue cities within red states at the federal level and also at the private level, like us just chipping in, you guys chipping in, going, all right, let's just try to help, right? So, and why do we have to do that? Because the red states go, hey, you're a majority black town, maybe you're a majority Democratic town, we don't care about you, we're just gonna leave you. But maybe we'll have no water. Hey, don't worry, our donors will make tons of money off of it. So the Republicans that run the state will cash in on the corruption, right? And then we'll leave you to die. And we're not gonna fix a goddamn thing because you live in a vicious red state run by vicious Republicans.
And finally, I do want to tell you what the Justice Department is seeking to do specifically here. The Justice Department proposal lists 13 projects the interim third-party manager, Ted Hennepin, will be in charge of implementing. The projects are meant to improve the water system's near-term stability. According to a news release, among the most pressing priorities is a winterization project to make the system less vulnerable to things like, weather, cold weather. So hopefully the Justice Department is effective in what they're pursuing here. We'll see how it all plays out. But this is not just a Jackson, Mississippi problem. This is a nationwide issue. Obviously, it reminds me of what happened in Flint, Michigan. It just keeps happening over and over again because we don't have actual governing in this country. We don't have actual political leadership in this country. We have a bunch of narcissists who seek political office to enrich themselves.
Yeah, by the way, guys, always check the description box for links. So tyt.com/relief will be a link in the description box if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook later. So, and one last thing. So we criticize the Democratic Party very heavily. Obviously, the Republican Party is filled with monsters, as I just told you. But we also give credit where credit is due. So Garland doesn't like to pick big political fights. He's generally a person who's not very courageous. But behind the scenes, when there's not a big political fight, he does do the right thing. And here's an instance of him doing the right thing. And is there a difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? Why do we even bother voting for Democrats if they're on economic issues oftentimes just as bad as Republicans? Because a Republican administration would have never helped the people in Jackson, Mississippi. And that's a fact, stone cold fact. I mean, look at that Republican governor making fun of them. At least I'm not in Jackson. We left them to die, right? That's the Republicans for you. Not only are they corrupt, but they rub your face in it and they brag about how vicious they are. The Democrats behind the scenes sometimes do the right thing. It's not much, right? But yes, there is a difference. And yes, this is because of a Democratic administration helping.
When we come back from the break, I will tell you how I was right. We'll be back.
All right, so many great comments. First, let's go to Super Chat. Jermaine Smith just said what up and gave a good amount of money. We appreciate it. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Or person, I don't know, can't tell. And Kamala Gaya Kim also donated a little bit. Thank you. We appreciate it. But I mainly started with Super Chat because of Anthony McClendon. Anna, you're gonna want to pay attention to this. And I don't fully agree with this, but let's listen. Progressives voting against the rail workers just proves that electoral politics alone won't save the day.
I agree.
Building strong community coalitions to pressure the system will. Hashtag Anna was right.
Yep, no, you nailed it. AOC ain't worried about us because we've got no power. Like we're not organized. She's concerned about Mama Bear and being accepted among the corporate elite in the Democratic Party. That's what's really going on. If there isn't a successful outside pressure campaign, they will not fear you, they will not serve you, and that's what's happening. That is what I believe, I'm sorry.
Okay, so don't give up on electoral politics, that's my
But I'm not saying that either.
And neither is Anthony, to be fair, okay? Having said that, you know you're allowed to give $100 Blue Apron cards too.
Blue Apron card for you.
Anthony, you gotta be a member. So if you're a member, email at rewards@tyt.com and you'll get $100 in free food.
Your comment fed my soul, so I want to feed your tummy.
All right, look at this. Everybody wins. Okay, speaking of which, Moondragon says, I was asking myself why come back to TYT day after day? The answer, TYT's family. We appreciate it, your family to us too. And thank you for being part of us.
There's a big super chat.
I know, I'm getting to it. Yeah,
cool.
that's what I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Benjamin GL says, Cenk, please watch Star Wars Andor and review it on TYT. Every single progressive needs to watch the show. It's the most anti-fascist, anti-corporate, pro-leftist show I've ever seen from a major studio. How much do I have to super chat to make this happen?
Bart, did you give us $100 super chat? Is that what happened?
I'm a fella, not a Rockefeller. Believe me, I would. And I am looking forward to this discussion because I've seen every single episode.
So Benjamin, you're awesome, thank you, and you're not alone. Your biggest ally is Bart, that's why we went to him, our person who runs audio for the show. He's been telling me every week, you gotta watch Andor, Cenk, you gotta watch it. So thank you, I love you guys, and we can even share in the shows that we watch together. Somebody else had a comment about Yellowstone, but I'm gonna run out of time. But I also wanna give Benjamin credit for another comment here. He said, AOC's an amazing politician in person. She's the true ideal for an average politician, but she's not a leader.
Nope.
So I'm afraid you're right, Benjamin. I mean, look, and by the way, people can evolve, and she just got started at this, and so never give up on good folks, right? But has there been a lot of leadership from any progressive, and to be fair to AOC, from any progressive in Congress?
On this, Tlaib wasn't buying it.
Tlaib, yes, and Benjamin mentioned that too in another post. So Tlaib's been great, Bernie Sanders has been great. But leadership means, hey guys, let's come together, let's have a strategy, let's execute that strategy, and let's stay strong when corporate media attacks. Let's stay strong when Hakeem Jeffries attacks. And let's not keep bending to Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi. That kind of leadership, still nowhere to be found if we're being honest. And we are. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, but also KA. Kay, thanks for joining us, really appreciate it. And Progressive Canuck, American, well, funny. I was about to say American hero. He's actually a Canadian hero. And thank you, gifted 5 Young Turks memberships for the good folks watching on YouTube. So I love our community, TYT Nation, sticking together. Everybody, you can join at tyt.com/join as well. All right, Anna.
Well, let's give you an update on Mayor Eric Adams and his mental health plan. Just this week, New York Mayor Eric Adams announced that he had a plan in place with guidance to involuntarily commit individuals who are suffering from severe mental health issues on the streets of New York. Now, when we covered that story yesterday, I had some reservations, and it turns out I was right. Now, what were my reservations? If you missed the clip, here they are. The backlash in a lot of ways is accurate because of the vagueness of what he's proposing here, the lack of resources that I'm noticing when it comes to treating mental health patients, and also just the factors necessary to determine whether or not someone should be involuntarily committed. These are questions that need very specific answers to, and unless he can provide those answers, this could be a disaster. The city said it would roll out training immediately to police officers. Okay, the NYPD has not been reformed in any way. A lot of the issues that we've had with the NYPD persist. So, okay, you're talking about training. What does that training entail? Because the idea of having the NYPD respond to people who are suffering from severe mental health issues is already a major red flag for me. So the NYPD was blindsided with the announcement that Eric Adams put out there recently. They apparently had no idea this was going on. No one touched base with them on the training, which is concerning. So according to the New York Post, they spoke to some of the sources within the NYPD. Here's what we know. The NYPD was blindsided by Mayor Eric Adams's announcement that cops will start taking homeless people into custody for psychiatric evaluations and potential hospital committal, and scrambled Wednesday to start making it happen. The source also said that City Hall sort of jumped the gun on this, adding, "Not sure why they did it." One source even told the Post, quote, "It's kind of a hot mess." Guys, remember, we're talking about involuntarily committing people, okay? This has to do with people's freedom, bodily autonomy, civil liberties. You have to be super detail-oriented, specific, and well-resourced to do this right. And so far, none of that is in place. Let me continue. Another source said, "Like everything else, it gets dumped on our lap and we're expected to solve the problem without any guidance." But Adams claimed during his press conference announcing the directive that he plans to begin the trainings right away. And by the way, there's one other issue that I had, which was, of course, the resources. What were the resources? What money was being allocated to this? And it turns out that there are issues here, including the lack of beds. I addressed that. Let's just quickly watch that video. Adams was asked, "Okay, well, do you have enough hospital beds for this?" And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, she's committed to providing 50 additional beds." What? That's your answer to a very important question, by the way. Good job to the reporter who asked that question during that press conference, by the way. Great question about the resources and the need for beds. That's your answer though? 50 beds that Kathy Hochul said, like, sure, yeah, no, I commit to that. We'll get around to that eventually, sure. I don't even know if the 50 beds will happen, but 50 beds, clearly not enough. Let's go to the last graphic here. This is the update. There are more than 1,000 people on waiting lists for community-based programs catering to people with serious mental illnesses per data I obtained. Eric Adams, who issued a major mental health plan yesterday, told us he was unaware of the wait lists.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Okay, so guys, there's two different issues here in my opinion. One is the incompetence of politicians. And so if you're a young Turks viewer, you might not be surprised by that. If you're a sentient human being in America, you might not be surprised by that. But if you're an avid consumer of mainstream media, you will be surprised by that, because you've been taught and brainwashed your whole life that these politicians are revered figures, amazing people. ones that we should honor, right? And take seriously. No, I've met tons and tons of politicians. They're not that bright, and they have almost no ability to plan. They couldn't plan their way out of a wet paper bag. I say that sometimes about Trump, but really, there's others, including the Democratic Party, are not that much better, okay? So here comes a mayor of New York, the largest city in the country. You'd think he would ask simple questions like, how many beds do we have? If we're gonna commit people, how much space do we have?
Exactly.
What are the standards for committing people? I mean, like just a very, very, very basics before you go launch something that's gonna affect a lot of people, right? No, they oftentimes they don't plan at all. They're like, I don't know, let's just do something. We need to do it for PR reasons.
No, there's a crisis in the country right now, especially in cities like LA and New York. The federal government needs to be involved. It is a state of emergency. It is. The resources need to be allocated. You can't just say, we're gonna involuntarily commit people, which again is a serious thing. And as I mentioned and discussed in detail yesterday, I do think there is a place for that.
Yeah.
But you have to keep in mind that civil liberties matter. People's bodily autonomy matters. You have to be specific about what factors into the decision to involuntarily commit someone. What kind of resources are there? What kind of treatment are you gonna provide? But none of that exists. It's crazy. So what's gonna happen is if he actually does implement this in the haphazard way that we see it's happening right now, it's gonna lead to all sorts of horrific stories. And then it's just nothing's gonna happen to actually improve the mental health crisis that we're experiencing across the country. Because they're gonna look at what Eric Adams did and say, no, we can't do that because that fails, right? That's a failed method of dealing with this.
Yeah, it's almost like he's setting it up to fail. So, all right, guys, that leads to my second point, which is that the reason why we get attacked from all fronts, left wing, right wing, middle wing, whatever, is because we do something that no one else does, balance. Everybody else tells you the answer is always in the extremes, right? We should never involuntarily commit anyone, it's an offense against their civil liberties. We should involuntarily commit people who have broad range, just let the cops do their job, take everyone away. That's what the two camps almost always say.
Yep.
When the answer is obviously not at the extremes. What it is sometimes folks are in a situation where they're not making free choices. They're in a bad spot and you're not helping them at all by saying, oh yeah, hashtag freedom, go live in the streets. If you're on the left and you think that's helping them, I think you have a very skewed interpretation of what help is, okay? On the other hand, the right wing, no, you can't just go lock up people because the cops thought they were mentally ill. The cops will think that looking at them wrong will make you mentally ill, right? I mean, they'll abuse the living crap out of that instantly. You have to have incredibly clear guidelines and it has to be balanced. So some people need help and we need to get them that help, even if they can't volunteer to that because of the condition they're in. When you have a massive mental health issue and you're on the streets, let alone when you combine it with drugs, you're not in your right mind. You're not voluntarily doing anything. And so we need to get those folks help, but we can't do it willy-nilly.
We can't do it in a way that tortures them and brutalizes them.
100%. So, and if you're an advocate on the left and say, hey, we need more mental health facilities so we don't over police and put everybody in prison when they don't belong there, great.
Yeah.
So we've got to get a lot more funding for mental health, okay? So you got to make sure that you close the loop. That if you are criticizing something, you've got to have a constructive answer. And mental health is a constructive answer, and I think we all agree to that on the left, right? But you've also got to get people into those mental health facilities when they need it, and don't talk to me about nonsense freedom for people who are, for only the ones that are clearly not in their right mind.
And
I'm not the judge of that, by the way, professionals are.
Mental health professionals.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, some sad news out of Iran following the World Cup loss for the country's team. Apparently there are some protesters in Iran who have been celebrating Iran's loss, and unfortunately there are consequences for some. We've got that story and more coming up, don't miss it.
want to update you real quick on something we were trying to do earlier in the week. We tried to get you guys to help in having the Democrats ask a question of the chair of the CFTC about how to get inflation under control. It was about a Wall Street loophole. You guys did a fantastic job. We reached over 100,000 people on social media. So thank you. Did the Democrats ask that question? Of course not. Okay, but we're going to keep going and going and going until we mount it. If 100,000 people didn't do it or impressions, then we'll go to 200,000, 2 million, 20 million until they get it. So thank you for participating.
Real quick, so someone sent me Ryan Grimm's tweet in regard to the legislation that prevents workers from striking, and Grimm writes this. There seems to be a lot of confusion here about the vote yesterday. The unions wanted the Progressive Caucus and the Squad to vote the way they did so they could fight in the Senate. Okay, I need you guys to understand there's a disconnect in regard to the union reps and the union members.
Yes.
And so the union reps wanted the workers to accept the deal that was brokered between the White House and the rail companies.
And the union reps.
Yeah, and the union reps, exactly. But the workers turned it down.
So understand, look, we've been telling you about how union leadership is not representing the union members for a while now.
Yeah.
But in this specific case, it goes further because union leadership negotiated that deal.
Yep.
And then they went back to the workers and the workers were like, no, that deal sucks.
Right.
So the leadership caught feelings over that too. So they're like secretly and now not so secretly going, yeah, go ahead, make sure that they can't strike. Oh, that deal we negotiated was so good. They should have taken it. So beware of union leadership.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Anyway, continue.
No, you had comments.
Oh, I do, yeah. So this is in regard to our bonus episode yesterday where John and I had an idea to get both of our dogs to do paintings, and then we were questioning whether we should maybe auction them off for a charity. And Lady Shub writes in, who's been a member on YouTube for 8 months. Thank you for being a member. To answer your question from the bonus episode last night, yes, we want you to auction the dog paintings. Also, speaking of dog shows, how about The Bachelor? But it's a dog choosing its human.
Oh, that's a hilarious idea. Okay, you know what? Who is that? That's a member?
Yes, Lady Shub.
Lady Shub, you made her go and me laugh. $100 Blue
Yes.
Apron gift card for a genius idea on a new Bachelor show that definitely will not happen. Okay, Gabby Marina writes in, mainstream media will always favor the perspective of the managerial class. The goal is always to avert a strike and never to give workers dignity. Of course, Gabby, great point as always. And then Connor the Emerald Dragon said, we got BBB all right, but instead of Build Back Better, it's Big Business Biden. Ooh, that's a good handle too. I do declare says, what is Manchin's problem? He knew it would not pass and he still voted no. He can't even pretend to be a Democrat. No, guys, the reason he voted no is because he was signaling to his donors, send checks here. He wanted to do it publicly so that they would send the check. Back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. We got more news.
Earlier this week, Iran lost to the United States in the World Cup, with the US scoring 1 goal and Iran scoring 0. Now, there are ongoing protests in Iran, and some of these protesters actually celebrated the fact that Iran lost in the World Cup. And unfortunately, one Iranian man has been shot dead by security forces for celebrating his country's exit at the World Cup in Qatar. Miran Samak, who's 27, was shot dead after honking his car horn, which in a city that's northwest of Tehran, according to human rights activists. Samak was targeted directly and shot in the head by security forces following the defeat of the national team against America, said the Oslo-based group Iran Human Rights. We do have an image of him, and he's unfortunately no longer alive because security forces shot him dead. Now, the execution came as Iranians were celebrating the country's World Cup exit as a symbolic victory against the country's regime. And remember, there are mass protests against the country's regime following the death of a 22-year-old woman who allegedly wasn't wearing her headdress correctly. And they allege that she died from cardiac arrest, but there is a reason to believe that she was actually beaten to death after she was placed in custody. She was a healthy 22-year-old woman. There was no reason for her to die from cardiac arrest. Now, Iran's security forces have killed at least 448 people in the crackdowns on the protests, including 60 children under the age of 18, obviously, and 29 women.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of interesting parts of the story. One is how much popular sentiment was against the Iranian national team. So if you're not a soccer fan, it's hard for you to understand how much countries care about soccer. Especially if you live in America, you probably don't get it, okay? Some of you do, of course, if you've been following along and played it, etc., when you were younger. But countries are mental about their soccer teams. Just, they live and breathe that stuff. And for them to turn on their own national team is extraordinary, especially on the World Cup, especially as they could reach the round of 16, which makes them means they could win the whole World Cup. And that's how, and it has nothing to do with their team. And a lot of the guys on the team are good guys that, remember, protested against the government too. Their anger, the population's anger, is towards the government, right? So it is just extraordinary that they were happy that they're Iranian nationals. I've never seen anything like that, okay? And I've been watching the World Cup now for a depressingly long time. So now, then the Iranian regime shows you why their own people hate them that much by executing that guy in the street for honking a horn.
Yeah.
Summary execution on the spot. That's what tyranny looks like. Tyranny also looks like taking a young woman because she didn't dress appropriately and you wanted to dictate every part of her morality and beating her to death in a room full of guys because they're the moral ones. Okay, they're the most disgusting pigs I've ever seen. And that goes all the way to the top. The Ayatollah is a tyrant, and now there's chants all over Iran about death to the dictator. And so now there's one last element of this that I've been telling you throughout these protests. Thank God America didn't intervene. If we had dropped one bomb on Iran, none of this would have happened. Because then the young people of Iran would have rallied around the flag, and the Iranian regime would have gotten to do propaganda and say, it's not the Iranian people, it's the goddamn Americans. And it would have helped their propaganda tremendously if we had done something as stupid as what the neocons wanted, dumbass, horrible Benjamin Netanyahu wanted. Oh, just bomb them, who cares? It's not just that they're bad people, it's that they're incredibly dumb. It would have been counterproductive. Instead, we have an organic revolt, maybe even revolution against the horrific regime in Iran. And this is the way it's supposed to go. And to every person that does something as simple as honking a horn or clanging on a pot or shouting in the streets or showing up, you're heroes, you're absolute heroes trying to get freedom for everybody. And by the way, you're the moral ones for sticking up for that young girl who they beat to death, those goddamn tyrants.
All right, let's move on to a horrific story. There have been multiple investigative reports on these hospice scammers. And when you look to how much of that industry has been privatized, you'll understand why this is going on. So let's discuss. Privatized hospice care includes little oversight, mistreatment of patients, and a lot of fraud. And recently there were two massive investigative reports by ProPublica and The New Yorker that you should know about, especially if you have a loved one who is in need of end-of-life care. Try to find a nonprofit organization, because if you rely on a for-profit, private equity-backed hospice facility, you might be putting your loved one at a massive disadvantage. And you might be assisting these companies in scamming both the federal government and the state government of funds. Now, hospice care has been increasingly privatized over the years. For instance, for-profit providers made up 30% of the field at the start of this century. But today, they represent more than 70%. And between 2011 and 2019, research shows the number of hospices owned by private equity firms tripled. Yeah. So with privatization, what happens with privatization? Private companies have that one objective. What was it again?
Profit.
Profit. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, great.
And Anna, I'm just going to add something else that's very complicated, so I know most mainstream media reporters can't understand it. You get the profit by increasing prices and reducing costs. Now, in the context of a hospice, what do you think reducing costs means? And what do you think increasing prices means? Well, you're about to find out.
Exactly. Now, they love defrauding, but the federal government and the state government, when it comes to the federal government, has to do with Medicare funds, state governments of Medicaid funds. And here's what we know based on you gotta read the New Yorker's report. It's lengthy, but it's excellent. So the aggregate Medicare margins of for-profit providers are 3 times that of their nonprofit counterparts. Under the daily payment structure, a small hospice that bills for just 20 patients at the basic rate can take in more than $1 million a year. A large hospice billing for thousands of patients can take in hundreds of millions. So there is money to be made. But there are some regulations pertaining to claims for Medicare funds when it comes to hospice care. Okay, so I should note those federal payments are distributed in what is essentially an honor system, which anytime we're talking about private industry and an honor system, we're in a lot of trouble.
That's absurd.
Yeah, exactly. So there's very little oversight. And even in some of the instances where there is oversight and the DOJ steps in to do something about it, there are some really corrupt judges that side with the hospices, and I have a specific story to get to on that in just a moment. But first, the federal government, recognizing that an individual patient might not die within the predicted 6 months, effectively demands repayment from hospices when the average length of stay of all patients exceeds 6 months, right? Because the reason why they want to do this is they want to ensure that hospices, especially the privatized ones, aren't trying to, collect Medicare funds by bringing in patients who are not eligible. You get what I'm saying? People who aren't close to dying, people who are not at the end of their lives. So they have this regulation that essentially says after 6 months, you have to start giving our money back, because clearly this is not a person who is who needs the end of life care. Okay, now they found ways around it, of
course they did,
discharging them as soon as they're about to hit the 6 months. So think about that. They have elderly people that they're providing services for, and they're collecting Medicare funds as a result of providing these services, because that's all they really want. That's all they really care about. And then as soon as they get close to the 6 months, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we're done with you. We're done with you, okay? And they intentionally seek patients who are not near the end of their lives, who are not eligible for hospice care, but they don't really care because they know that they're gonna discharge them as soon as the 6 months is up. Now, in Frisco, Texas, according to the FBI, a hospice owner tried to evade the Medicare repayment problem by instructing staff to overdose patients who were staying on the service too long. He texted a nurse about one patient saying, "He better not make it to tomorrow or I will blame you." The owner, luckily in this case, was sentenced to more than 13 years in prison for fraud in a plea deal that made no allegations about patient deaths. Now, and one other graphic I want to read, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, Cenk. Although a quarter of all people in hospice enter it only in their final 5 days, most of the Medicare spending on hospice is for patients whose stays exceed 6 months. In 2018, the Office of Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services estimated that inappropriate billing by hospice providers had cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, so first there's the issue, the hospice issue, and then the general issue. So again, in business, you strategize about how to maximize profit, and you talk in words like metrics. So they would have metrics. And I guarantee you that if you investigated these private hospices, all of them would have one metric that would stand out for you: length of stay. Because however long they stay is however much money they're going to get. So then that will incentivize management to lengthen the stays to the maximum, 6 months. It will also incentivize them to dump folks right after 6 months because they don't get paid after 6 months. These are stone cold facts. Now, if you're a regulator and we had an honest government, that'd be the first thing to occur to you, right? And you would say, first of all, you would say, well, that means almost by definition, we should not have these privatized, right? But if we're gonna have them privatized, we should have them heavily regulated because we built an incentive for people to abuse the system.
Yep.
In how we are paying them, right? And so they're gonna try to increase their revenue and they're gonna try to cut their costs. Cutting costs is, hey, if you haven't died in 6 months, you gotta go. You gotta get out of here. Increasing their revenue is, well, maybe that guy was on the edge of death, but maybe he isn't. Maybe we can milk it for 6 months. Let's put him in the hospice wrongly, right? But the problem is that we've turned our government into a casino. So it's an open auction. Everybody comes in and bribes whoever they want. They get whatever result they want. So of course people are gonna come in and bribe the government to make sure they don't regulate.
Oh, but Cenk, it's not just the government that gets bribed. Doctors be rolling in that dough because these hospices are looking to recruit new patients. And what better place to recruit new patients than hospitals? And so this is just so unbelievably gross. Some hospice firms bribe physicians to bring them new patients by offering all expenses paid trips to Las Vegas nightclubs, complete with bottle service and private security details. The former mayor of Rio Bravo, Texas, who was also a doctor, received outright kickbacks.
Yeah, boom, there you go. Both the government and doctors in one fell swoop by just finding the mayor who's a doctor, and you save on bribe money as well.
And get a load of this. Other audacious for-profit players enlist family and friends to act as make-believe clients, lure addicts with the promise of free painkillers, dupe people into the program by claiming that it's free home health care, or steal personal information to enroll phantom patients. In fact, here's an example of a phantom patient, a 29-year-old pregnant woman learned that she'd been enrolled in Revelation Hospice in the Mississippi Delta, which at one time discharged, get a load of this, 93% of its patients alive only when she visited her doctor for a blood test. So she goes to the doctor for a blood test and the doctor's like, are you receiving hospice care? Like, what's going on here? But like, yeah, and it's from this one place that discharged 93% of their patients because, I mean, they were probably quickly approaching that 6-month period, right? Now, finally, there are some rare instances where the DOJ gets involved, and that certainly happened back in 2014. They opened up a case against this one company called Hospice Care. And here's what happened. So the judge ruling on that case, or the judge presiding over that case, there was a jury and everything. She was pretty corrupt. Judge Karen Boudry said that she had great experiences with hospice care for both her mom and her dad. But principals in the case disagree about whether she disclosed that the firm handling Hospice Care's defense, Bradley Arendt, had just hired her son as a summer associate. I mean, that judge should not preside over that trial, okay? And guess what happened? There was all sorts of evidence that she wouldn't allow to be presented in the case. The defense team had petitioned Boudry to separate the proceedings into 2 parts. The first phase limited to evidence about the falsity of the 123 claims in question, and the second part examining, among other things, the company's knowledge of falsity. The Justice Department objected to the arbitrary hurdle, arguing that the purpose of the False Claims Act was to combat intentional fraud, not accidental mistakes. The fact that Hospice Care knowingly carried out a scheme to submit false claims is highly relevant evidence that the claims were in fact false, the government wrote. Nonetheless, in an unprecedented legal move, the judge granted Hospice Care's request. After nearly 2 months of testimony, the jurors deliberated for 9 days on phase 1 on October 15th, 2015. They found 86% of the patient sample ineligible for some period of hospice care. And so what ended up happening was the jury found the hospice company guilty. But you know what the judge did? She's like, oh, it turns out I made a mistake in my instructions to the jury.
Oh, what a coincidence.
I made a mistake, and since I made a mistake when I was giving the instructions to the jurors, we need a new trial. They have a new trial, and because of objections from the DOJ and all of that, she did a summary judgment. And guess who she sided with? The hospice.
Oh, wow, what a stunning coincidence, yet again. So, guys, if you're wondering, hey, whatever happened to the bank robbers? Remember we had Bonnie and Clyde, and the gangsters, Al Capone, etc. They wear suits now. And so if you're a smart crook in America, why would you bother robbing a bank? It's not that you're gonna get caught, that's not even the issue. It's just an inefficient way to steal money. Instead, you start a corporation, you pay off, find a way to pay off government officials. That's super easy. We've legalized bribery. You just give them campaign contributions. They'll do anything you want. Give to both sides. Sam Bankman-Fried, we're going to explain in another story today, said, oh yeah, you give the Republicans, Democrats, you get everything you want, right? And then you go and you bribe doctors, you go bribe judges, etc. There's nobody minding the store, man. So all the smart crooks have set up corporations and are robbing the American taxpayer to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. No smart crook in their right mind would just simply do a robbery anymore. You'd set up a company to do the robbery. And that's exactly what we have now. So, and then you would have a mainstream media tell you that the robbers are actually the most honorable people in the country. Oh, corporate executives, they are great men. We have meritocracy. Because of their great merit, they have risen to the top. And guess who's there, is right there with them? The politicians. Because of merit, they have also risen to the top.
Yep.
No, they've risen to the top by robbing the rest of us.
When we come back for the second hour of the show, yes, we will talk about Kanye West again, getting even more extreme with his anti-Semitism. We'll also discuss many of Herschel Walker's ex-significant others coming out and sharing pretty terrible details about the violence he used against them. That and more coming up.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny. Bye. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Jank. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. I'll refer to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richey. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was the white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
We've been around for about 20 years and we have about 20 billion views. Am I proud of that? Hell yeah, I am. We put out 20 billion messages in a bottle. Have we helped to move now 2 generations, millennials and Gen Z, to become progressive? Yes, those numbers are real. We moved generations. Were we the only ones? Of course not. But we have been the largest online news show for now decades.
I think they should stop picking on Elon Musk.
Wrong. Elon.
Back on the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys, but also Laura Montgomery and Brian Moore. Are they American heroes?
I guess.
Both, I guess, and of course, at the same time. You guys are amazing because every member helps to get this show out there, get our voice out there, and get the truth out there. We appreciate it. Look at this, Daryl Melton just became a member. Daryl, also an American hero. If you're on YouTube, super easy, hit the join button below the video. Everyone else, also super easy, tyt.com/join. Casper.
Some updates on Herschel Walker. Now another romantic, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm like struggling with the story right now. Another former romantic partner of Senate candidate Herschel Walker has come forward with allegations of domestic violence. She was joined by 4 other former girlfriends who spoke to the Daily Beast about Herschel's serial dishonesty, troubling behavior, and unstable mental state. Now, this particular piece focuses on the story of Cheryl Parsa, who actually dated Walker for a long time, 5 years, between in the early 2000s. Now, she says she's speaking out now because she's recognizing his behavior, the mental health issues associated with his behavior, and she's definitely concerned. She says that what she's seeing are the telltale signs of dissociative identity disorder, which she tried to help him manage for half a decade. Now, this is what she says. He's a pathological liar, absolutely, but it's more than that, Parsa said. He knows how to manipulate his disease in order to manipulate people, while at times being simultaneously completely out of control. She said that when she was with Walker, he used his diagnosis as an alibi to justify lying, cheating, and ultimately destroying families. And Parsa did provide a detailed account of a 2005 incident that turned violent after she caught Herschel Walker with another woman at his Dallas condo. When Parsa confronted Walker, she said the soft-spoken gentleman that she had grown to love vanished. He grew rageful and physically intimidating, she said, yelling at her repeatedly. "You want to see a man? I'll show you a man." He pressed his forehead against hers, she said. His massive hands were on my chest and throat. By the way, I do want to warn you guys, this is obviously triggering for people who have been abused in the past, who have suffered from domestic violence. So I do want to just give you a warning because I totally understand how it can be triggering. But let me continue. I saw a fist flying toward me. As I ducked down, he hit the wall beside my head and staggered backwards toward the bedroom saying, "Come on, I'm gonna show you what a man is." And I heard him from the bedroom beating himself up against the wall repeatedly with force. So I'm gonna stop there. There's a lot more to get to, but Cenk, I just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so look, guys, we're stuck in a situation where we have to talk about his significant mental health ailments, and then folks who have family members or themselves are going through that, then they take it personally. I don't want you to take it personally, and it doesn't apply to everyone. And most people that have this disorder are not at all violent, okay? But in Herschel Walker's case, he has written and he has said that some of his alternative personalities are violent, okay? And he often carries that around a gun. He often talks about hurting himself or the women he's with, both with the gun and without the gun. And so I have to ask in a very earnest way, if Herschel Walker wins, which of his personalities are going to show up in the Senate? So he says, oh, I'm past it. And I wrote a book about it, and the book was therapeutic, and I had got therapy back then, and now I don't need any therapy at all, okay? Every doctor that treats this says that's nonsense. Not about Herschel Walker, because they're not treating him. They're just saying this is a very tough ailment to treat, and there's no drugs for it, and you have to always be in therapy. And so he hasn't gone to therapy in years and years and years. And apparently stressful times trigger his alternate personalities. And some of the personalities are baby-like, childlike, and he apparently went through some trauma when he was younger. And we feel for that from back in the day. I don't know what it was, but that doesn't excuse your actions today, okay? But some of his personalities are very violent.
Right.
And he has admitted, yes, some of my personalities are prone to violence. He talks about serial killers in a way that the girlfriends and the wives say is unsettling, okay? And which Herschel Walker talks about the serial killers and fantasizes about it? I don't know. In the book, he said he's got 12 different personalities. One of his girlfriends says that it might be about 20 different personalities. According to himself, he told her that at different times. So I don't even know, look, I don't know how to deal with this period, right? I'm not a professional in this case. But I do know that someone saying, I have several different personalities, some of which are very violent.
And I don't need treatment anymore.
I don't need treatment, and I'm gonna go, and you should put me in the Senate.
Right, exactly. I mean, come on.
Come on, and look, you could have an ailment, and we could help you, and you can have certain kinds of jobs, but yes, senator? I mean, guys, this is not normal, okay? And Republicans are like, no, he has mental health problems, great, let's send him to the Senate. I mean, they're rooting on guys with like black masks on and talking about Nazis. Yeah, I'm talking about Kanye West. They're rooting for just lunatics of every stripe. And so here comes someone who is literally mentally unwell, admits it. And by the way, the doctor, can I just say, the doctor who treated him was like, is a conversion therapist. Oh, no, he didn't get any treatment, Jesus Christ. And Republicans look at that and go, attaboy.
I want to go to graphic 6 here, and this is a different doctor, so I don't want you guys to think it's the same person, but this was telling. So she also recalled an instance as described to her by Walker's former therapist in which Walker took his doctor, his ex-wife, and another woman hostage. Walker, Parsa said, was threatening to kill everyone in the room but himself.
And himself.
Oh, and himself, I apologize. Until his therapist talked him into letting the women go and call the police.
It's not impossible that he would do it again. Can you imagine? I mean, first of all, he's got to get treatment, right? Second of all, can you imagine if he did it in the Senate, where he just pulled out a gun? I mean, it's not impossible. And he takes the other senators hostage and say, okay, now you got to do what? I mean, what are we doing, guys? What are we doing? Look at the sorry state of our government. And our country where half of the population goes, sees all these facts and goes, I can't wait to vote for him.
You know, there was a clip I came across today from MSNBC of all places. They interviewed a voter in Georgia about the runoff race. And the voter identified as a Republican. He's like, I am a Republican, I'm a business owner and trying to justify it because he wants like less taxes. I get it. But you know what he said? He's like, oh, Herschel Walker is gonna lose. And then he went into like commentary about what a wonderful guy Raphael Warnock is.
Hey, look, by the way, I'm talking about the majority of Republicans that consistently vote for Walker and guys like that, and did so in the primaries, did so in the first general election. This is of course the second one. This is the runoff. Okay, now having said that, as we told you
I'm sorry, I have to correct myself. It was the same doctor.
Yeah, it was the same doctor.
My bad, that was a mistake. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the conversion therapist doctor. Okay, so but I have to give credit to the 8.5% that we talked a lot about on election night in Georgia specifically, that voted for Kemp but did not vote for Walker. Now, I don't like Kemp at all. I think Kemp's a terrible guy. So I'm not giving them credit for voting for Kemp. I'm giving them credit for being obviously very Republican and going, I can't have this lunatic in the Senate. I'm either not going to vote for him or I'm going to vote for the Democrat. Thank you for caring about the country instead of your political party. We need a lot more of that in this country. Also with Democrats.
And as I mentioned earlier in the story, there were other former love interests of his present, and they also, 4 ex-girlfriends in addition to Parsa spoke with the Daily Beast for this article. All described Walker as unstable. All said he called them my dear, and all but one of them said that to some degree they fear him.
Almost everyone he's gone out with, which is a gigantic list. Okay, at one point, by the way, in 2010, I believe it was, he told Howard Stern in an interview, I've only ever been with 2 women. At that point, he'd already had 3 kids with 3 different women, other than the 2 women he had already admitted to being with, and already had paid for multiple abortions with other women.
But wait, but honestly, at that moment, it depends, like, which personality, which one of the alternates?
Oh, by the way, I mean,
right?
look,
because he probably genuinely believed it in that moment.
Who knows? I mean, that's an interesting point. I never thought about that. Now, look, I don't mean to be too glib about it, but since he has at least 12 different personalities, could one of them be a Democrat? And so he can go in as a Republican. And I mean, Republicans, be careful what you wish for. And then somehow he gets convinced to be a Democrat and goes, well, I told you I had 12 personalities. And are you all 12 are Republican? Maybe 4 of them are Democrats. So who's gonna show up in the Senate?
All right, we're gonna take a break. We'll come back, talk about the Kanye stuff. But we still have a lot of good stuff to get to after that, including the QAnon groomer, who is legit. Not a good guy, definitely had sex with a minor. We'll give you the details and more when we come back. Don't miss it.
Warhol.
All right, speaking of the Georgia runoff, we're covering it on December 6th, so that's next week. And Rashad Ritchie, who is an expert in Georgia politics, he was the head of the Democratic Party in Georgia. Do you guys know that? Check out Indisputable. Anyway, he's gonna be on with me and John to cover that runoff. It starts right after the Young Turks at 8 o'clock Eastern. On December 9th, just for our members, we're releasing a mini doc called We Move Our Generations. It features me, Anna, JR, and John. I think you guys will love it. So members, check that out on December 9th, tyt.com/join to become a member. And of course, tomorrow is Food for Thought Trivia. And that's where we're gonna give away $100 in free food from Blue Apron to 100 of our members. That is a giant number of members to get a $100 Blue Apron gift card. And as you know, it's a real gift card. It's not, you don't have to put your credit card info in, etc. All right, so let me go to some disagreements with us, and that's interesting. First, I want to thank Tim LeBlanc and Amber Jackson for donating on Super Chat. You guys are awesome, thank you. I'll start with Silly Little Director wrote in about our commentary about what is happening in New York and involuntarily committing people. Nope, New Yorker here, the NYPD have a history of misusing committing people for mental health. Just look at what they do to their own, i.e. Schoolcraft 4, whistleblowing broken windows, Adam's shill for the NYPBBA. But at this point, the Benevolent Association disagrees with Adam, so let's be clear about that. But I hear you. Look, some people say, hey, maybe you could, because I get what you're saying about involuntarily committing people, but we just do not trust the cops to do it under any circumstance. I understand that's a good disagreement to have. I think we can get to the right answer and then we can get to balance, but it doesn't mean just trust the cops. I would never say that. You have to have really good principles and you have to apply them and make sure that the cops are doing it right. But I hear you and I wanted to make sure that your voice was also heard. Michelle G wrote in the state of Indiana, a 72-hour hold will cost you over $2,000 once you get to the facility. The determination was made by a social worker and a doctor I never saw. At the facility, the doctor knew I didn't know to be there. Doctor knew I didn't need to be there, sorry. So Michelle, I'm positive that that's what happened to you. I trust you 100%. But also remember, we have to be careful about that not happening to anyone, but sometimes people are not in the situation you're in. They actually do need help and they do need to be involuntarily committed. It depends on the situation, and that's why it depends on balance. Even if something happened to you, remember what happened to you is not necessarily what happens to everyone, and what you know, and your state is not necessarily what their state is. Now, other people came in on the other side, and let me see. There's so many comments here. No, I'll give you another one that doesn't trust Adams. Kobe Green said, this is not incompetence. This is Eric Adams wanting to take a problem, homelessness, and shove it into a dark room where no one can see it.
Honestly, I think.
I am Shakespeare in the flesh, Walt Disney.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Kyle F, Sam Amasamji, and Nicholas Hanna, they all just became members. You guys are wonderful for doing that. You help us get the word out. We can't do this show without the members, tyt.com/join. And speaking of members, during the social break, I read a bunch of comments that disagreed with us about involuntarily committing people. And I found the one I promised you guys. Dawned on Me wrote in, man, this story really affected me. My brother was mentally unhealthy, I believe they meant to say, and homeless, refused medical treatment. He died of COVID last year, very sad. So every situation is different, and sometimes people get involuntarily committed when they should not, and we have to be really, really careful about that. And sometimes people really need that help and don't get it. Okay, Anna.
The story I assume everyone's been waiting for, so let's do it.
There's a lot of things that I love about Hitler, a lot of things.
We're living in the worst timeline, and that was just a little taste of it. Kanye West, wearing I don't know what on his head, decided to go on InfoWars to talk about how much he loves Hitler, how much he appreciates the Nazis, because I mean, there are very fine people on that side. I mean, that's essentially what he said in one of his rants. And
well, he's on that side. He says he loves Hitler.
Yeah, I mean, a good point. And yeah, I don't know what he's wearing, whatever. But like, we're gonna show you two compilations because there were terrible things said throughout the show. And honestly, like, I want to just quickly ask you. I feel like just playing the videos and hearing the disgusting, toxic garbage, the vile speech coming out of his mouth. And I know we're gonna condemn it, but it's also, I don't know, does it help by showing the videos and like repeating that disgusting garbage?
Well, I'll tell you what, so this is an issue that we have to deal with all the time.
Yeah.
If you just air stuff without giving context, you're doing damage, right? But you'd be shocked at the number of people that have heard that stuff, and now almost everybody's, or a lot of people have heard it, but never heard the counter. So you always think like, what, you have to counter, is that Hitler is not a good guy?
I guess at this point,
yes, yes. A lot of right wingers don't know. Like they're like, oh, what's the big deal, right? Because they've only been fed conspiracy theories and insanity, right? So that's why we have to beat it back. Remember when we tried to ignore the right wing when they were first rising like a decade ago on YouTube?
Yep.
And I thought, who would believe this trash, right? And it turns out a lot of people would believe that trash. So now speaking of trash, look, quick comment before the compilations. If you notice in that clip, Nick Fuentes is like, yes, he's talking about how much he loves Hitler. So peas in a pot. Alex Jones looked uncomfortable. Why? Alex Jones brought him on to whitewash it and go, oh, you're not a Nazi, right? And he's like, no, I do like Nazis. Oops. So you're gonna see it, right? And so he looked uncomfortable for that reason. And of course, we've got to comment about the mask. I mean, I think Marvel picked the worst time to introduce their new villain.
Don't do him dirty like that.
I'm kidding about
I'm not
Marvel,
even a Marvel fan, but like, don't do that to them.
But apparently the new villain is the black condom. Okay. So what is that? I mean, look, in a sense, Nazis have to be embarrassed that this guy's representing them. But here's another analogy. He looks like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction.
100%. That's what I thought of.
But that's what the right wing has done to his mind. They've turned him into the Gimp mentally.
And
so he like literally showed it. He's like, oh, okay, I'll come out and dress as the Gimp. So that's the pathetic state that the Nazi Kanye West is in.
All right, let's do the compilations.
I've done a lot of study. I think Hitler was a really bad guy, and I repudiate what Hitler did. I understand that the British intelligence set him up and used him.
I like Hitler.
I don't like Hitler. And I know you're trying to be shocking with that.
I'm not trying to be shocking. I like Hitler. I see good things about Hitler also. You can't say out loud that this person ever did anything good, and I'm done with that. I'm done with the classifications. Every human being has something of value that they brought to the table, especially Hitler. Yeah, I don't like the word evil next to Nazis. I think we need to look at.
Oh my goodness. Just because you don't like one group doesn't mean the other. But look,
I love Jewish people, but I also love Nazis. Well, I want to say there's a lot of good Nazis that were just fighting for their country. And for them all,
like George Soros,
for them all to get put in a box, they're all in a box. Every Nazi's bad. Well, could some of the Nazis have just been fighting for their country? Oh, they're all. Oh, we can't put them all in a box.
All right. Do you have any comments on Hitler?
I have to agree with you.
Schwarzenegger said he loved Hitler. They gave him an award. I'm just saying, I don't like Nazis, and I don't like what some of the mafias are doing either.
I like Hitler.
Yeah, sometimes people suffering from severe mental health issues but refuse to get the treatment that they need to, be stable, do need to be involuntarily committed. I think Kanye's a good example. Cenk.
No joke. I think.
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
I think his family should involuntarily commit him. I mean, look at him. What is that mask? And then he going telling everybody how much he loves Hitler. Okay, so for those who don't know, Hitler and the Nazis killed 13 million civilians. Forget the war. I'm not even talking about the war. I'm talking about the gas chambers, the concentration camps, etc. The war, of course, killed way more. And so of the 13 million, 6 million were Jews, and they picked on them because they were Jewish. And so the Jews did not have any special privileges or power. It was the exact opposite. They're like, oh, you're Jewish, come with us. And then they would take you, and then they would take your kids away from you. And you didn't know which of the kids were gonna die, and it turned out a lot of them did. And sometimes they would make you choose between these. I read accounts, and I actually took a law class in law school from the second prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials. After Justice Jackson, there was a second American prosecutor that put away some of the top Nazis, and he shared the evidence with us. So I got to see it for myself. It's an incredible privilege to see it, okay? But it's also harrowing. The stories of the nail marks inside the gas chambers. The gas chambers were concrete, and then But it was, I forget now, it was 3 feet, 6 feet of concrete. They were, because they didn't want the gas to leak. But you could still hear the screams of the women, the children from inside the gas chambers. They were the worst monsters that we've ever seen in history. And this clown of clowns comes out here and is encouraging people to root for them. It's one thing to say, hey, there were German soldiers that weren't Nazis or German soldiers that were conscripted, etc. It's another thing to say, I like Nazis, I like Hitler after what he did. So anyone, look, now it's indisputable. And the thing about Kanye is that the right wing's now mad at him, not for liking Nazis, but because he gave away their plausible deniability. I mean, look at Alex Jones there. There's first of all, the worst fake laugh I've ever seen in my life. And then he's like, oh yeah, like Soros is a Nazi. And he's like, well, look, the British forced the poor Nazis into the war, but you don't like Nazis, right? So he's trying to say the same things, but in slightly coded language, and Kanye won't let him. Kanye keeps saying, no, I like the Nazi, I like Hitler. He's blowing their cover. That's why they're so frustrated at him. But they were following him up to this day, and I bet you a lot of right wingers are still following him.
I mean, are they frustrated with him? I mean, they keep inviting him on their shows, like super giddy about it, super excited to have the conversation. Yeah, and like, hold on, let's just pause for a second, okay? All of these disgusting, rabid right wingers who keep pretending like Cenk has never condemned his stupid opinion piece that he wrote in college about the Armenian genocide, because they purport to care so much about the Armenian genocide, right? They care so much about it. Yeah, they didn't care about the Armenian genocide. Clearly don't even care about the Holocaust, as they're providing a platform for a guy to spew the most vicious anti-Semitic garbage imaginable. Okay, they're just, I just can't believe that this is where we're at. And every year it gets worse. Every year the circus of hate just grows larger in this country. The discourse becomes even more toxic. I mean, they're parading around literally a mentally ill person who is spewing the most vicious anti-Semitic garbage about a man who slaughtered millions of people, slaughtered them. That's what he said. He said that he liked them. He did some great things. What did he do that was so great? I can't with these people anymore. Yeah. I mean, it's like they're not reasonable individuals. They have no interest in making this country better. They have no interest in looking out for their fellow Americans. It's just a money-making circus for them.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Look, the Armenian genocide definitely happened. The Holocaust definitely happened. One of the things that they did in the Holocaust was they would pick some of the Jews, and by the way, some of the Poles, some of the Roma, or the different categories, and they would say to them, now you have to turn on your people, otherwise you die first. And they're obviously emotionally, psychologically destroyed by that. And then they see people tearing each other apart in the camps, the soldiers for the slightest disagreements, torture, death, execution, gas chambers, etc. So all this actually happened. And Kanye was obviously a Nazi. I kept calling him that because he kept saying things like DEFCON 3 to all Jewish people, Jewish mafia, the Jews control the media. He said it over and over and over again. It was the most obvious thing in the world. Just a couple of days ago, Tim Pool's like, I can't tell. I'd love to have him on.
Oh, look, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. We have another compilation video to get to, but let's hold on that. Because earlier today, Tim Pool's tweet, I think Ye could actually win the presidency. He tweeted that this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and then 2 hours later, after he couldn't use the plausible deniability regarding the Nazi stuff, he didn't even really say much. He just said, well, and then he used the S-bomb, right? Yeah. And by the way, what does Kanye think about Tim Pool? As Tim Pool is continuing to kiss his ass as hard as he possibly can. Let's skip ahead. Let's go to the Kanye video featuring his commentary about Tim Pool.
Tim Pool is an NPC, and you're a real human being. So no one's ever heard of Tim Pool. You're the legend that is Alex Jones, and you were fighting on the front line, and now we're here with you. You got some other superheroes part of the Avenger movie fighting for Christ.
I don't know what's more embarrassing, Tim Pool or all of his little minions who flood the comment section of any video we do about Tim Pool because we hurt their feelings by talking bad about their daddy.
Oh, I don't care.
Like, it's just so pathetic. You guys are so pathetic. Tim Pool is so pathetic. It's amazing to me that anyone looks at him with any admiration.
Oh, if you admire Tim Pool, you're an obvious fool. So I'm not even having that conversation. So look, don't tell me, by the way, Tim Pool, that you're not a right-winger when this morning you were kissing a Nazi's ass, okay? And so now it's settled, Kanye West says he loves Nazis and Hitler, so there's no plausible deniability left, right-wing. So if you're still a Kanye supporter, that means Kanye is not the only Nazi in the room, you're also a Nazi. Oh my God, just because I want to kill the Jews, you call me a Nazi? Just because I love Hitler, you call me a Nazi? Yes, that's the definition of a Nazi. So you don't bring that crap around here without us fighting back.
Now, Parler has announced that they are cutting ties with Kanye West.
Oh, there goes Candace's plausible deniability. Oh, she couldn't execute that robbery. I guarantee you at the Candace Owens home, they took out a calculator, they did math on how much money they were gonna make off of staying with Ben Shapiro versus how much money they were gonna make off of Kanye West. And when they figured out, hey, Daily Wire is gonna get us more money in the long run, they'd let Kanye loose. They knew he was a Nazi from the beginning.
They sure did.
We told you how many times he said, 5 people close to him said over and over again that he said he loved Hitler. It was not in dispute. It was before today. It was why do you think I'm calling him a Nazi? It's not superlative. I never called him that before. I never called anybody that before. He's a Nazi because he says I love Hitler over and over and over again. This is just him saying it on tape.
Do you want to do the second
let's do the last
compilation? Okay.
I love everyone, and Jewish people are not gonna tell me you can love us. And you can love what we're doing to you with the contracts. And you can love what we're pushing with the pornography. Jesus can save everyone. But if the Zionists can get us so afraid that they're gonna do what they've been doing to me, attempting to put me in jail, freeze my accounts, smearing me on the media, all of these things. And Obama was not the first black president, he was another Jewish president. The Holocaust is not what happened. Let's look at the facts of that. And Hitler has a lot of redeeming qualities. And he didn't kill 6 million Jews. That's just like factually incorrect. I'm actually tired of hearing about the Jews. Like, I love them. Honestly, I don't even care that much,
But we spent the last 2 hours talking about them.
Because it's fun.
Cenk, take over.
Yeah, apparently it's fun to praise Hitler and Nazis and to say that it wasn't a big deal. That's a lot of fun. No, the Jews did not freeze his bank account. The moron didn't pay his taxes. He apparently owes the government $50 million. Are you surprised? He's the dumbest person alive. He's got mental health issues. Apparently no one in his family or that is close to him cares about him at all. All they care about is robbing him. But hey, Alex Jones, Tim Pool, you guys got a lot of attention. Congratulations, you must be so proud. And Alex Jones is loving this because someone got to look crazier than he did. Now he gets to say, "What? Look at me, I'm a moderate." I mean, I thought the poor Nazis were pushed into the war by the goddamn British.
Oh my God, I know. Okay. I forgot to comment on that.
Yeah, but this guy loves the Nazis even more than I do. So I'm the moderate here, and plus I get all this attention. So that's why Tim Pool and Alex Jones are gonna make a lot of money off this, selling their penis pills and their brain pills. And if you believe anything that anyone on that panel said, well, to be fair, you do need a brain pill. The ones that Alex Jones sells you obviously doesn't work. Look at you.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the QAnon leader who turns out to be a pedophile.
I'm sorry for the people that are hurt. I cause hurt and confusion. And I'm sorry for the families of the people that had nothing to do with the trauma that I had been through.
We got a moron here.
All right, so let's go to Twitch for a sec. Dr. Lee, that's who writes in, wonder if he's wearing the mask to distort his face so he can claim he never said any of that. That's the same thing I thought, to be honest. It's not gonna work. It's obviously him, right? There is no other black condom. But who cares what he says later? The guy's obviously totally and utterly nuts. So, well, why would you take anything he says seriously? All right, Gypsy Rock says, you should know that the Nazis killed the mentally ill too. So he would love them so much if they were around now, because he'd be one of the first ones lined up. A dent hitchhiking dragon said, and Fuentes sitting there with his dirty smirk, enjoying the chaos like the goblin that he is. I mean, God, goblin is a perfect description of Nick Fuentes. And now let's note that it was about a week ago that Donald Trump dined with Kanye and Fuentes. He's running for president right now. And I guarantee you, every MAGA idiot chudhead is gonna be like, yo, he didn't know. I mean, all those news reports about how much Kanye loved Hitler, never saw any of them. All those news reports about Fuentes on January 6th and how he was a pivotal character and in that riot, and how he talked about how he hates black people and Jews. Oh, God, poor Donald Trump. Are they two random Nazis having to walk in and he had dinner with them? I mean, it could have happened to anybody, really. Couldn't have happened to me. Couldn't have happened to any other presidential candidate. It only happens to the guy who invites Nazis into his house. And last one on this is Mayhem Mendez wrote in, this InfoWars is like between two ferns, but all the ferns are Nazis. At least a funny comment about a tragic situation. So let's go to YouTube members. Jonathan Borzjani just writes in, Anna and Cenk, the power duo for the ages. Thank you, Jonathan. Tracy Ravenhawk says, no cookies for Garland. He needs to indict Dumpo, referring back to one of the first stories we did. Chankla Kung Fu Dragon said, Amy Goodman, love her so much. Democracy Now, great reporting. Yes, we showed a clip of Amy Goodman. And she's an American hero. She does a wonderful show on Democracy Now.
She's she might be the only person in media who's just consistently above the fray, does her job, doesn't get involved in drama, always substantive. You're right, she's an American hero.
Yep. Same person wrote in saying, keep putting pressure on AOC, get her on TYT, see what's with her. Look, honestly, we've asked her to be on TYT many times. She doesn't come on. And if I was in Congress and I took votes, hard votes, or did compromises, I would go on whatever show and tell you why I did it. Because there's gotta be a good reason why I did it. I wouldn't hide. So that's just the reality. She can do whatever she wants with that reality. And ZK Gaming sings, Cenk and Anna 100% of the time are spreading facts. Thank you, we appreciate it. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also the Nerd King and Dr. Sugar Johnson. Thank you for joining. Casper.
All right. One of the QAnon leaders turns out to be a pedophile. And we learned this because he also happens to be incredibly stupid and decided to file a defamation lawsuit, an ill-fated defamation lawsuit that led to a discovery process where we learned about the case involving him sleeping with a 15-year-old girl. Now, at the heart of this story is Phil Godulewski, who's got quite a following, to be sure, with more than 600,000 followers on the social media app Telegram and 156,000 subscribers on the alternative video platform Rumble. He profits from encouraging his fans to sign up for financial arrangements like a multi-level marketing scheme that sells silver. Earlier this year, he used his QAnon earnings to buy a $1.7 million house. But then he made a lot of dumb decisions, including filing this defamation lawsuit, which of course he lost, and we learned a lot of details about his past. So let's get to those details. Let's skip ahead. And I do wanna give you a trigger warning because we're gonna get into details about what he did, what he said to the 15-year-old girl. It is triggering for sexual assault, people who have suffered from sexual assault. So I just want to make sure you know that we're about to get into some details here that are difficult. But let's go to graphic 3 here. In 2008, 9 years before QAnon began, a 25-year-old Godulewski worked as a high school baseball coach in a school district outside of Scranton. That's where he met a 15-year-old female high school freshman referred to in court records as BD. The student's boyfriend died by suicide soon after they had met, and the baseball coach comforted her. So perfect opening for him to be a disgusting predator. A few months later, with BD still 15 years old and Godulewski a decade her senior, he's 10 years older than her. So he's 25, she's 15, okay? They began a sexual relationship, according to police records and a sworn affidavit from Godulewski's victim that was filed in court in November. Now he love bombed her, right? He showered her with gifts, according to police reports, and a letter written by her parents filed into the defamation record, including a $2,800 pair of diamond earrings. He also lavished her with attention in the form of text messages, not smart, that laid out details of their sex life with more than 300 messages in one day alone. So what did the messages say? How bad is this? Very bad. So in one, he wrote that they would only ever be sexually satisfied if we did it like 4 to 5 times a day. In another, he allegedly wrote that the teenager looked so good and was giving incredible head while lamenting his own sexual performance. He also allegedly provided her with a log of his ongoing thoughts over several days, many of which were about his struggles with their illegal age difference. Realize that you're only 15, but quickly stopped caring, one of the messages read.
Of course.
Why are we so compatible, read another. I'm 10 years older than you. And in 2010, he was indicted on a raft of charges related to the alleged sexual relationship. In her recent affidavit, BD claims that he contacted her and begged her to recant her claims against him, threatening to kill himself if she didn't. In response, she stopped cooperating with law enforcement in the case. He ultimately pleaded guilty to a lesser count of corruption of a minor, receiving 3 months under house arrest. Now, he denies that there was ever a sexual relationship, but remember, through that discovery process in the defamation lawsuit, you learn about the text messages. You learn about the evidence in that case. So you can deny it all you want, but you put it in writing, you idiot. And remember, QAnon is the group that goes around accusing others of being pedophiles. I mean, how many of these stories do we need to do where the people accusing others of being groomers and pedophiles end up having some pretty significant skeletons in their closets?
Yeah, as usual, of course. So look, the people who believe in QAnon, I think there's 3 buckets there. One is people who will believe any conspiracy theory, and you've probably met somebody like that in your life. I know I have. You tell them anything. The Earth is flat, the moon landing didn't happen, and they'll believe it, right? Pedophile ring in a pizza shop in a basement that runs the whole country. They'll believe it in a second, right? So you've got that group, and then you've got a group that's actually my heart goes out to. You're like, QAnon, how could your heart go? Because there is some percentage of those folks who are victims themselves. So since it happened to them, they understandably think it happens to everyone or to a ton of people. And so when you tell them, oh, they're powerful people do pedophilia, they go, of course they do. I know I suffered it, right? So unfortunately, they're very susceptible to that kind of idea. Then the person coming in can fill in the blank as to who is running the pedophile ring. They could say dentists, they could say Democrats, and those folks are more prone to believe it. A lot of them, of course, don't. A lot of them are very rational and know that it's trauma that they lived through, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody does it. But unfortunately, some percentage are susceptible. Okay, and the third bucket is the worst, and that's the bucket he's in. And it's almost always the leaders. They're the ones who are the pedophiles that are projecting. They think, well, I can't wait to sleep with children, so I assume everybody can't wait to sleep with children. And so the Democrats must also want to sleep with children, so I'll accuse them of that, and that'll be really effective. And besides, which is probably true, because Doesn't everybody want to sleep with children, right? And that is what a lot of their leaders think. And this guy goes, he already slept with children. So he probably thinks, of course, right? Of course the Democrats want to do the same thing I want to do. No, we're not all monsters.
Yeah.
But the leadership of QAnon has a stunningly high percentage of being groomers and pedophiles. So just be careful who you're listening to.
And I'm going to end it here because this is, I mean, this guy, I mean, when he succeeded in getting her to stop cooperating and he got to plead guilty to a lesser charge, after that, he felt probably invincible because he got into contact with her again, and get a load of what he said to her. In a March 2021 text message, according to the defense attorneys, he texted the woman to express his condolences on her grandfather's death and alluded to their sexual relationship. "I had no idea your papa died," he wrote in a text message, according to court filings. "I'm so sorry. I think we had sex in their bed though."
Bragging about how he had sex in the dead grandfather's bed. He also offered her basically bribes when the trial came about, saying, "Oh, there could be a big payday for you if you help me with the defamation lawsuit and lie about it." And lastly, you noticed earlier, the way that he got out of criminal prosecution was threatening to kill himself because he knew that her boyfriend had killed himself.
Yeah.
And she was super vulnerable to that. This is one of the worst people I've ever heard of, except for all the other QAnon leaders. So just because somebody tells you something online, not meaning it's true, okay? Yeah. So for God's sake, verify. And when you hear guys like this, understand that they're usually the ones doing it.
We end the main show today with money in politics, dark money, and it's the intersection of dark money and Sam Bankman-Fried. Let's do it.
About the same amount of both parties this year. That was not generally known because despite Citizens United being literally the highest profile Supreme Court case of the decade and the thing everyone talks about when they talk about campaign finance, for some reason, in practice, no one can possibly fathom the idea that someone in practice actually gave dark. So, I don't know, all my Republican donations were dark. And the reason was not for regulatory reason. It's because reporters freak the out if you donate to a Republican. They're all super liberal and didn't want to have that fight. So I just made all the Republican ones dark.
Sam Bankman-Fried, who, whose crypto platform crumbled and who might be facing some serious issues considering the brokerage firm that he founded was taking money from depositors of the crypto platform and basically losing it through their investments, is saying, no, I actually didn't just donate money to Democrats. I did donate a lot of money to Democratic candidates on the record, but I also contributed a lot of money to Republicans as well. I just did it through dark money contributions. And so if what he's saying is true, and to be quite honest, I don't know what to believe with this guy. He seems like a liar. He seems like one of the most dishonest people on the planet, but nonetheless, that was from his interview with Tiffany Fong, an independent crypto journalist, and the interview was recorded on November 16th and then published 2 days later. He was speaking at an event, and of course, as always, he discloses way too much, and he did so right there. Now, if he's telling the truth, okay, take a look at this list of the biggest donors in the 2022 midterm cycle up until September of 2022, okay? So if Sam Bankman-Fried donated as much to Republicans as he did to Democrats, then he was the 4th biggest donor to Republicans. Just think about that.
Yeah, so look, I love this story because this is a crime scene and it's like a CSI version of what happens in Washington. And here's the criminal himself explaining it. And he explains every part of the scheme and it matches what we've been telling you for the last 20 years here on TYT. He says you give to both Republicans and Democrats. That way you neuter both of them. And in fact, in an earlier exchange that he had with a Vox reporter, when the Vox reporter asked, is it for PR reasons? He said, yeah, just PR, F the regulators. He was pretending that he was giving money to Democrats because he wanted regulation of FTX. Of course, he didn't want regulation of FTX because he was taking all the customer money, and now 1 million people are owed money. 1 million, okay? He took their money and then he gambled with it for himself. And why was he allowed to do that until he lost it all? Because he'd already paid off the Republicans and the Democrats. And here he is explaining the crime to you guys. And then he says, now look, this is important. Citizens United happened. Everybody knows how bad it is theoretically, but nobody ever talks about the dark money as if it doesn't exist, but it does exist.
I mean, he's right about that.
Exactly. Now, why does nobody ever talk about it? We talk about it all the time. It's because mainstream media never talks about it.
Because they're corporate owned.
And where does the money go? In these midterms, the Sam Bankman-Fried apparently gave $80 million to both Republicans and Democrats 40 each. It went almost all to TV and to media. $17 billion in total, these elections went straight to mainstream media. So mainstream media, of course, told you, didn't tell you where the money's coming from, because it's coming from crooks like Sam Bankman-Fried. They're part of the crime. And he says, you give to the Democrats to get good PR, and then you give to the Republicans because you want the Republicans and the Democrats to both cheat on your behalf and make sure they protect you, okay? In a sense, the Democrats and the Republicans are the mob, and you're paying them protection money. Let me rob all these people. Let me rob these million people. He owes $3 billion right now, okay? Let me take billions off of them, and then you give me protection. And Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell go, yes! And of course, what does the press do? Before he was caught, Sam Bankman-Fried, an American hero, giving all this money to the Democrats to fight back against fascism. And we're like, wait, why is he giving only to corporate Democrats and he's giving against all of the progressives in the primaries? Because the progressives are the only ones who would have actually regulated him. That's why he spent millions against Nina Turner, who's now one of our hosts. And he was in that race, and he gave Chantel Brown all that money through PACs that he had.
That's right, yep.
And Chantel, what did you promise him? Now, everybody in Washington thinks that's a red line. Don't talk about the, are you saying Chantel Brown is corrupt?
1000%.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. She was so happy to receive that PAC money on her behalf because she said, yeah, of course I won't regulate you. Of course. What do you think they paid all those Democrats millions of dollars for? For charity? No, for corruption. And he just told you.
Yeah, and on Chantel Brown, I mean, would she be a darling of the establishment Democratic Party if she weren't corrupt? I mean, think about it. I mean, there's a reason why the establishment Democrats were so vicious toward Nina Turner. In both times she ran, both times.
And I want to be clear about that. So when Nina ran, Chantel Brown was a nobody. There was like 12 people running against Nina Turner. Nobody knew. And the Democratic leadership came in and said, okay, raise your hand if you are gonna take tons and tons of PAC money. And Chantel Brown was like, me, I'll do anything for PAC money. And they're like, good, we're picking her. And they picked her out of her goddamn hat.
Yep.
The total utter nobody. And they loaded her up with millions and millions of dollars of Sam Bankman-Fried's money, Israeli lobby money, and that's just a fact. Democratic majority for Israel bragged about how we took out another progressive. Who did we give the money to? Oh, Chantel Brown, who cares? Any corrupt Democrat would have done. She's just a filler, right? But it's not about her. It's about all of the Democrats that take the money. All those guys that took money from guys like Sam Bankman-Fried are crooks, and the press never tells you that.
Never. All right, give you a little preview of the bonus episode today, which is gonna be a lot of fun, okay? So what are people with Kanye tattoos doing about it? Are they happy about their decision, or are they trying to do something to rid themselves and their person of the tattoo? We'll talk about that. And one of my favorite Dave Rubin clips of all time. He has also weighed in on the Kanye controversy, and it seems like he was never able to escape recovery mode.
Yeah,
but it's okay.
So we're gonna do that for the members, tyt.com/join. If you're on YouTube, hit the join button below, as did Rachel Green, Joe, Quinn Noyes, and Chicken Bread. They all just became members. They're all American heroes. We love you guys. Thank you for supporting this show and letting us get our message out. By the way, check out Unbossed, that's Nina Turner's show. Go to youtube.com/unbossedtyt. It's live every day at 4 o'clock Eastern. Make sure you're watching that. She does a great show for us now. And then the comment got erased here, but I wanted to read, somebody wrote in, I think it was Super Saint, it was a YouTube member, hashtag Anna is always right.
Not always, no, I'm not always right. But here's what I will promise you, if I'm wrong, I will admit it, and admit it as quickly as I can, so thank you for that.
Oh, by the way, is Tim Pool admitting today that he platformed a Nazi and kissed his ass? Okay, I mean, is there any truth on the right wing at all about anything? If you hear a right wing media host talking, you're hearing someone lying. That's what they do for a living. They spread hate and lies. And by the way, as we've explained 1,000 times over, including that Sam Bankman-Fried story, mainstream media ain't that much better. They just lie for a different boss, the corporate bosses. All right, members, we'll see you in a minute.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs